It's another beautiful Sunday afternoon. This is Rubbin Minds. Welcome. My name is Ebuka Obuchandu. Thanks a lot for joining us. First of all, happy Salah to all Muslim viewers and friends, and of course, anybody who's celebrating this great holiday with the Muslim community. It's always a time to reflect, and we also hope that it's a time for, all of those in leadership to, seek, in prayer and all of that, just what Nigeria might be needing. We're hoping that at the end of this holiday, we're coming back refreshed and feeling stronger. And of course, once again, happy Father's Day to all fathers celebrating as well. And we hope that you are celebrated on a day like this. We don't get that very, very often. 1,000 as minimum wage, and that seems to still be a bit of a contentious point for both parties. So we're hoping that by Wednesday, or maybe tomorrow, I don't know, whenever the NLC decides to address us, things will be normal. We also had a rough week with football. The Super Eagles didn't particularly deliver on the front with regards to World Cup qualification. So a lot of Nigerians are not particularly feeling positive about our chances for going to the World Cup. But all in all, last week we did celebrate Democracy Day. 25 years of the return to democracy. June 12th has become the new date for celebrating democracy from May 29th. And things have been a lot of talk did happen. We did hear an address from Mr. President, and we're going to be starting off the show today. On that note, I'm joined here now by Olufumi Olaosun. Thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Did you celebrate Democracy Day? What was it like for you? Because a lot of people thought, on the one hand, there was nothing to celebrate, considering that a lot of people have said that we're going through an economic crisis of a generation that is heavy. But on the other hand, it's 25 years, it's a significant number, and we're here regardless of how things are happening. How did you feel about the day?
Well, if you look at how far we've come and what brought us to this point, I think it's actually something worth celebrated. I mean, if you go back in time, you go back in history, you look at all the struggles and what the nationalists of old tried to do to ensure that we have what we have today, it's actually worth celebrating. Of course, there are challenges, Nigeria is a very unique country in its own, but there have definitely been things to look forward to, and we can only keep the hope alive. That's the thing about it. And I know at this time, it definitely looks like there's nothing to look forward to, but we have to keep the hope. We just have to.
And on a day like this, we have gotten sort of a tradition over the years, at least the one tradition that remains. We don't get our presidential media chats anymore. We don't get a lot of, interviews from our leaders anymore. Yeah. But it looks like at least Democracy Day broadcast at least happened. And a lot of people were not particularly excited listening to the president, because we had, once again, almost a rehashing of all of our problems. We had sort of, okay, we're working on policy promises still. But is it a fair point to say that a lot of, concrete solutions or plans were not given in that broadcast? Did you hear anything on the day that said, okay, this is what should be happening, maybe by Democracy Day 2025? Did you see anything concrete laid down by Mr. President in that broadcast?
Well, one thing that at least rang through from his speech was the fact that he recognized our challenges are numerous. That's very important, because, I always say that for you to bring about solutions, you have to recognize that there's a problem. So he does recognize that there are challenges. And based on what he said, at least his speech, just like what he says, things that we've heard, and it makes for good talk. And it is just our hope that, based on what he has said, I know the government talks about the fact that the government has top priority areas. We talked about education, agriculture, security. It's good that all of these things are on the plan. It's good that there's a direction. And interestingly, some steps have actually been taken. It's just we may not necessarily have seen that at a large scale in terms of the impact that it has made, but because the problems are so deep, it's definitely going to take a lot to come out of it. So it is just our hope that hopefully by the next Democracy Day, we'll be able to measure and say, because now we're still giving him the leeway to say, okay, it's just 1 year in office, let's see. So we're hoping that by next Democracy Day, or even before then, we'll begin to see, because the assurances are so much. They keep telling us that, oh, don't worry, we're working, we're going to see changes soon. Let's just wait and see.
We'll have a guest who's joining us virtually, I believe, Adeni Ikono, if you can hear me. How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, of course, I'm here. Good morning to you, and I'm just very much around here. Yes,
Thank you very much for joining us. Just a follow-up question to you now, because we seem to have a nation. I mean, it's one of our biggest critics as well, or criticisms, where we say we have a lot of people who know how to fix Nigeria. And, you know, we see all of these opinion pieces written. The one thing Nigeria does not lack is policy. And the one scary thing for a lot of people as well is the fact that, you know, when people are in opposition or out of government, they seem to know all the answers to this, to our problems. With the government in power now, they spend quite a bit of time in opposition. I mean, a lot of what came out on Democracy Day was the fact that, you know, Mr. President was one of the leading voices, you know, against the military at the time and all of that. And one of the reasons why June 12th is Democracy Day today. Looking at, you know, like I said, the speech that was given on Democracy Day, a lot of people might say, okay, a few ministers here and there are doing well. The Minister of Works seems to be getting a lot of attention. The CBN governor seems to get a lot of attention as well, even if a lot of the policies might not be ringing through for people. There was an expectation of sort of a reshuffle or something along those lines from the president, because he kept saying, you know, from the day he got into office, if you don't perform, you're going to be shipped out. Are you happy with the way things are looking? I mean, ministers not performing per se. And was that an expectation of yours as well?
Thank you very much. I have tons of expectations, considering the fact that the president of the country has had serious connections to the most buoyant economy in Nigeria, in Lagos, first as a governor, and because he's hired 3 successive persons who took over from him, you'd have expected that a man who had such capacity should be able to translate that. But again, it's a learning curve for President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, because the economy of a state is far, far, far less than the economy of the entire country. We are the most populous black nation. And according to records, we are the most diverse black nation in the world. And that's a given. But let us also look at how the president, who in the midst of all his troubles leading to when he eventually got the mandate of the people, assumed office, you know, there are certain discretions every leader must take. Quite frankly and admittedly, any political position is not easy around the world. But one fundamental is to be careful with utterances, because there has to be an understanding of the society where you actually have the position of leadership. The 29th of May address of the president was the first step taken wrongly when he announced before the due date of the removal of subsidy. I think there should be a respect for what your predecessor has put in place, and that unsettled the polity. It went ahead to want a situation where we have more or less like a united foreign exchange market, where the black market and other markets have unified exchange rates. That also, you know, came in his face. You talk about the removal of the subsidy itself, that itself ballooned in his face. Now, intentions could have been right, but the utterances unsettled the policy, considering the fact that Nigeria is peculiar when it comes to policies. So that took us some time. So if you're talking about the policy steps he took, whatever the intentions were, intentions are usually known better by supernatural forces. But as existential beings that we're supposed to be, we subject whatever utterances, whatever policies and strategies to, quite frankly, serious scientific, you know, scrutiny. And we found out that those utterances were wrong, and the policies were also faulty. But that being said, there are also other things he made mention of. You know, the first few paragraphs of the speech he put forward, I saw that he gave credit to the founding fathers and, admittedly, founding mothers of this country. And if you go back and did a proper review of what the founding fathers or the founding leaders of this country put together, they were mindful of how policies can affect people. They were mindful of taking a wrong step, because that is going to have inter- and intergenerational impact. And I think that this generation must be very genuine with regard to whatever it is that they do for the people of the country, especially when it comes to the legacies they put down and the policies they put forward. So for this administration, one thing that it has done, and that it had admitted that it didn't do right, was along the lines of policies that dealt with foreign exchange and, of course, crude oil. But you'd also want me to chip this in because I know you have tons of questions for me. And that has to do with taking the pulse of the people. Anytime there's a policy somersault and there are reactions, and it appears as if the position of government has gotten to a stage where it's beginning to affect the average person, it is important to actually take certain steps back and consider how holistic has been this policy, especially as it concerns two basic things: inflation as well as food inflation. At the moment, we have in excess of 34% inflation in the country. We have, connected to inflation, the fact that people are actually not getting what they should get according to what the rule book says. The issue you opened with, Obina, is very important. You talked about the impasse between government and labor. The impasse between government and labor is also something very, very important. And until we realize that that itself can cause instability in the polity, because oftentimes such policies of government result in what is perceived by investors as a government that means well for the people. Whatever people do in terms of political leadership that doesn't impact the average citizen of the country rightly is, quite frankly, an assessment that will not be able to get the credit of about 40% out of 100.
Sorry to cut you in. I just want
to
quickly chip something in, because I mean, I hear you and a lot of us feel this, but I mean, there's always a counter argument, especially from government, and I want to know if you think they are valid. Because first of all, there's been this talk about, a lot of these things can be fixed in a year. We do know how bad things were with the last administration. A lot of this free fall started with that with that administration. We're here now. On the one hand, isn't credit supposed to be given to them for the fact that at least they're trying things? They might not be working or working as effectively as we want them to, but at least things have been done. There's no gainsaying the fact that Nigeria is very broke, where there's really no money to do anything. But the government is trying to do things. Do they get some credit for that? And we've seen the CBN governor for at least, he tries something, it doesn't work, he takes back, he tries something else. A lot of them are not working, but at the same time, I guess my question is, do they get any credits for at least trying to fix some of these problems?
Of course. Let's be factual here. There are certain credits that should go to the administration, because that is also very important. Now, one of the things you said that I admit has been going in certain direction would actually be, the Ministry of Work that has been gaining, as it were, some kind of attention. There's a lot more to do, especially regarding the Lagos-Calabar coastal line, regarding how certain buildings were demolished. At some point, they decided they are going in a direction, then later on, they retracted. That would have been a very good way to hold certain things down, because the plan for the Lagos-Calabar coastal line is actually a perfect one. But what are the issues surrounding it, particularly houses that have been demolished and the compensation? While the plan to build is interesting, is supported, you also must understand that there should be rightful compensation. That is one part. Let us also look at the Immigration Service, the Ministry of Interior. Across the world, I've sampled opinions regarding how passports get done, how things get done, the wait time and all of that. I think that is also commendable with regard to what this administration has done. If you look away from that and you want to talk about the central bank, we would have given the central bank certain kinds of credit. But if you looked at the period about a month, 2 months ago, and how within a week or 2 weeks, the Naira gained against the dollar, that was an applause. But that also has been affected, and it came that we perhaps would have expected certain levels of sustenance to the successes made at that point. So it is not, quite frankly, entire doom. But don't also forget this. When you have a 4-year tenure, and unlike us, and this, by extension, is a communication to the leadership of the entire country and future leadership, as well as the electorate. Let us stop this 100 days in office achievement, 1 year in office achievement. Try as much as possible to be modest in the fact that you want them to have the impression that you will deliver on certain terms of reference expected of you on certain documents that you are aware of. So I think that this tenure that we've given to them is 4 years. They've done one, they're on the second. And if at all we're to even do an assessment, can we hold our breath and allow the administration work? So when they cross the 2-year, 3-year mark, the closer they are to exiting the office, the better we are when we bring out the dossier of certain things that they've done. So I want to say that for this administration, certain levels of successes have been made. Then at the same time, there are other areas that need serious attention. Do not forget that when you open the first 2-3 pages of the Constitution, one of the responsibility of political leadership in every country, ditto Nigeria, is the protection of lives and property. And it has to be said that even in the month where we celebrated that the president took office, May 29 up until now, few days ago again, we've had repeated attacks in the north-central part of the country. It is important for the administration to know that whatever successes it intends to make or it is claiming to make may be watered down by the fact that people's lives and property are affected and they're not able to actually sleep with 2 eyes closed, if at all they even get any sleep. So it is key to also do that. But if you look at it again, the security issue that this administration has told us it is dealing with, we can actually help this administration to be reminded that there's a list of over 400 persons helping Boko Haram to launder money. We just want this administration to begin from there. President Muhammadu Buhari did not reveal the list. Yes, please.
I'll come back to you.
So
I'll come back to you. Let me come back to the studio now very quickly.
Yes, please.
You've been hearing him speak. I'm also joined now by Mola Oluwashola. Thanks a lot for being here today. Let me come back to you very quickly now. First of all, because a lot of what he mentioned there, and I wanted to piggyback on that, because I started off talking about the fact that we've lost, sort of this communication with our leaders. It kind of started with the last administration where there's almost we don't get those interviews anymore. We don't get the presidential media chats. We don't get broadcasts as often as we used to. We also have come to a point where it looks like even the legislature is starting to detach. We had a national anthem sort of taken away without a public hearing, nothing. It just happened, we blinked, and we had a new anthem. We're hearing now about the president's tenure being reversed to 6 years. I remember the last time it happened under President Obasanjo was a whole national debate. Sure. Now we're at a point where a lot of these things just happen almost without consultation to the people. For a democracy that is supposed to be maturing, it feels like we're regressing, doesn't it?
Well, sometimes you ask questions I want to throw us under the bus. But, well, I do agree with what you have said so far, because when we talk about democracy, I mean, there's something we all quote, government by the people, for the people, and it's important that the people are involved in every process along the way. But looking again, I told you I'm an historian, so I'm very big on history. Looking back from where we're coming from, it's very important to see the progress we've made. And in this current generation, I know you referenced the national anthem, which indeed we had expected that based on the outcry, the noise made on social media, the government would at least take it back.
I mean, every other country would be referendum.
Yes, exactly. And even if they didn't do that, let's say they made that mistake, just hearing the noise alone should have made them think, okay, maybe we made the wrong decision. But we haven't seen that. But that's why people like us, would I say young people now, we cannot afford to keep quiet. Because, now the temptation, because of the challenges, there's so many, the temptation now is, we don't know what these people are doing. Please let them continue. But we are only going to get worse if we continue on that path. So while we have gotten to this point, they talk about 3 phases of democratic, processing and all that. And while we've moved past the first and second phases of saying, okay, we've been able to take over our role, we've been able to come into a party, we're not talking about consolidating the gains of democracy, which is where we are right now, which to a large extent, we may not necessarily have seen that. So it's left for the people to keep allowing their voices to be loud, rather than saying that since the government is not hearing us, we're going to stop speaking. Because the minute we stop speaking, we definitely have gone back in time. So we need to stop speaking until we get what we want, or we see what we want to see. It may take some time, yes, and the challenges, as we've said, they just seem to be increasing every day, but we definitely have to keep speaking. So we haven't really regressed, if you look at it in historical context, but there's so much more that needs to be done and can be done. And with the example that you gave, it's almost taking us back again in time, because just like you said, there should have been certain things in place before you come up and say you want to change, because that's literally our identity. It's like coming up and telling us, okay, our flag is no longer green, white, green. Who knows, maybe that might be the next one.
The way things are going.
But yes, yes.
Well, I'm following up from that, because I don't know if you agree with her or not, but I mean, still speaking of democracy, and 25 years of democracy, there's also been the argument, for as long as I've known, to be honest, about the fact that this presidential system is not properly suited for Nigeria. Besides the fact that we are a little too large and complex for us to operate this system, there's also the argument about how expensive it is to run this. Well, there's been talk, so do we go back to the parliamentary system? There's a constant talk about regional governments. But of course, once you talk about restructuring, everybody gets jittery for some reason. And a lot of this, talking about regressing as well, and how Nigeria seems to be, honestly, factually moving back. Let's look at the GDP, for example. I think we hit our peak sometime in 2013, 2014, at 520 billion, our GDP in 2014. Today, the IMF has said that by December, we're going to go down to 253 billion, and the fourth, not second, not third, fourth, Algeria has a higher GDP than Nigeria at the end of this year. Is democracy working the way we're doing it? Of course, we all want democracy to work. We all want democracy for Nigerians, but the way we're practicing it, is it working?
Okay, so my opinions will be, first of all, as I'd say a realist and someone who is usually optimistic. So when we come to the conversation of GDP, I think it's more of reality. I think it's the effects that had a major impact on our GDP. And that was also knowing what really the value of the Naira is. So
we're living a lie all this while.
Yeah, so I think what has happened is because we pegged FX at a definite amount, we didn't know exactly the value of the Naira. We didn't know what harm was either happening to the Naira or not. Everybody was just working with a fixed rate, though the black market had its optics. So I think that GDP conversation doesn't mean Nigeria was not as big. It's just that because our currency lost a lot of value, then we dropped. So I think what we're actually facing is a little bit of reality based on the harms that have been done to our economy and the currency that we were not aware of. So I think that just helps us face the reality and now face the long-term gains of what gains or whatever would happen. So I think that's the reality of the currency. So when it comes to democracy, whether we're making progress or not, so I think you talked about the Constitution, and I think the Constitution was not built with the complexity of Nigeria at the time it was built. So I agree that we might need a constitutional review, but leadership is complex. And the whole process of a constitutional review is complex. So we really cannot tell what direction it will go. But I actually agree that we probably need a constitutional review. So have a better constitution that is taught, that is planned for the complexity of Nigerians and the way Nigerians need to be governed to make for good progress.
There's a lot of people that will say, well, we've had, how many constitutional panels have we had in the past,
We have two major ones.
We had one that was really expensive, we had, the Obasanjo one was very, and all of that, those documents are somewhere, do we go back to those? Why is there a constant need to have all of these panels and policy without implementation? And like you said, a lot of these processes are very complex. Anything with the Constitution now is going to take the National Assembly, God knows how long, and state assemblies have to also have their inputs. A lot of these state assemblies are barely standing, if we're being honest, So is that process looking feasible? Because with the way Nigeria is at the moment, you and I definitely agree that we are almost at a crisis point where, whether it's economically, look at the unemployment figures, you look at inflation figures, you look at just how, for want of a better word, it looks like divided along whatever lines tribal, religious people are, especially in the last couple of years, So something needs to be done. A lot of these things are long-term fixes. Talking solutions now, like you had said earlier, let me start with you. Where should our head be at in the coming months and maybe year by next Democracy Day?
So, like he says, a lot rises and falls on leadership. And what I truly believe Nigeria needs is a strong leader. Is a leader who is planning for the next 15 years. Unfortunately, politics, the structure does not allow that long-term planning. But if we actually do some form of research, if you look at the nations who have come far from a lot of underdevelopment and were able to make so much progress in a record time, it took a little bit of strong long-term leadership to say we are planning. We've had so many agendas, right? But the truth is that it was not feasible to implement them because a leader gets in today, the president gets in, and it is really serious. He can use the first 6 months to sort out whatever elections, the next 2 years to do something, and the next 1.5 years to plan for the re-election. That's really what happens. Because if you're in political circles, you see that towards the next election, all the conversations is around how do we score goals, how do we make people believe we need to be re-elected. So we are not able to do any effective planning to say, let's have this plan for the next 15 years and let's follow through with it. So that tenure is also a problem. Whether Nigerians want to agree, I believe that if we have strong leadership that can do long-term planning and there's real succession, then we can make progress. But with the way we are now, it's really about politics, about power, and about short-term gains. But I think that's why people have applauded Tinubu for some reasons, that he has taken some hard decisions that we believe in long-term would yield benefits. But we really cannot say now because we are going through the pain. Thank you.
Well, just to add to what he has said, but so that nobody gets an idea that they need to rule us for the next 15 years, so please. But really, honestly, but he does have a point in sustainability, because what we've seen over time is, each successive government, they come up, they have their own policies, they overthrow the next. But one important thing to do is to look, and which is, again, forgive, I have to keep talking about being history here, but it's very critical to look back what worked. Or what were the things that worked? What were the policies that worked in the past? Why were they thrown out? Because this goes beyond political parties and, oh, you're my enemy and all that. What worked? What can we take into the future with us? So these are some of the solutions. And also, the government definitely needs to work on a connect. You talked about the disconnect between the people and the government. You can't rule a people without knowing their pain points. And you must be able to listen to them, not just about hearing them and say, oh, we've heard you. You must be able to listen to them and get the solutions. Because you see, I work in the NGO sector, and one of the things I've seen NGOs make is, one mistake that they make is they go to a community, they look at the community and they think, oh, this is the need of the community. And by the time they start implementing the supposed solution they think is supposed to meet that need, the community doesn't receive it and it fails within the next few months. So if we really want to come up with these solutions, sustained solutions, that's the key. We have to come back to the people. So it has to be people-centric solutions. Let's hear from them. Of course, we will not all be united in how we think we should move forward, but at least there's a majority that will say, okay, this is how we should go about it. And the government must be willing to say, okay, how can we, because I think the bane of our governance is implementation. We come up with all these beautiful things, but implementation is a problem. So people-centric solutions, looking back in history to see what has worked, and of course, looking ahead to even bigger things. Adeni
Ikunu, if you can hear me very quickly, I think we have just about a minute to go. We keep saying there's light at the end of the tunnel. This tunnel is looking like a very deep, dark hole for a long time now. A year from now, I know you say I'm not a fan of 100-day celebrations or 1 year or whatever, but by next Democracy Day, what do you think this government should do that shows Nigerians, their intention, and that we can start seeing some sort of results as well?
All right, let's say that the Buhari administration has 16 amendments to the 1999 Constitution and many executive bills. Part of the amendment made included states being able to legislate on railways. And without a doubt, that's interesting, and some others. I feel that we should actually be ready to do an entire unbundling of this Constitution, because I keep telling people on different platforms, the military cannot hand over Constitution to civilian administration. That Constitution was a produce, as it were, of an administration that wore the khaki before we came back to democracy at the start of the Fourth Republic. So my recommendation for everybody to feel that they are part of this Constitution and to actually remove the lies that says we the people were not part of this Constitution. I'm happy they keep amending. The amendments can go on forever, but there are core areas that must reflect the diversity of ethnics, of religion, of sociocultural sensitivities of this country that this Constitution has not allowed. There are certain areas that must reflect the diversity and the control and management of resources that also this Constitution doesn't allow. Section 10, for instance, of this Constitution talks about there shall not be state religion. I put it forth to everybody listening to me across the world right now. Why do we have Sharia in the North? If there is no state constitution, why is it that Kano is collecting money for tax and breaking beer bottles and also collecting tax? So these are the things that this new constitution I'm recommending should reflect, where people who say they are Sharia states will not get a dime from taxes paid on alcoholic beverages, where people that say, okay, their religion doesn't allow them to eat certain food, they won't get a farthing from it. I think that that itself creates balance. Nigeria is a country that can function, but the people themselves must understand that the work cannot be left to politicians. If you look at it now, a lot of civil society organizations are asleep. Once elections are about a year, they resurrect from wherever they go to. Part of what civil society organizations must do is what I describe as continual sensitivity or continual sensitization, I beg your pardon, of respective people in their respective communities in blocks so that they can understand the political intellection of Nigerians is still below average, majority of Nigerians. So who do we sensitize? How do we empower them with knowledge to make the right choices? These are also what I want to prefer. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all our guests. You guys have been very insightful. I mean, I always say every day on this show, whenever I have these conversations, I try to live with something positive, but it's hard. Maybe the positive is we have the biggest portrait in the world now from Democracy Day. Thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you so much.
We're going to take a quick break. Okay. I will be right back. Please stay with us. Teasing me. Now it's time to show it. Now, a few days ago, I happened to be at a mechanic shop, and I had a mechanic and a few of his friends speaking, and they were talking about the fact that some people had passed away somewhere around their area, that they had eaten something, and they all died, and it looks like there was something going around. At the time, it sounded very strange to me. I'm like, in Lagos, why is this thing not in the news? It sounded very far-fetched, and I brushed it off. Well, on Tuesday, the Lagos State government said at least 5 people had been reported dead in the state as a result of a suspected cholera outbreak. And now we do hear word from the Nigeria Center for Disease Control and Prevention, NCDC, that at least 30 deaths have been confirmed from cholera in 2024. So we do have an outbreak in Lagos, at least Lagos for now confirmed, and there's a lot of sensitization going on by the Lagos state government. But a lot of people are wondering, cholera in 2024, how did we get here? Where did this come from? How scared or worried should Nigerians be, and Lagosians in particular? So I'm joined here by a medical doctor, Dr. Olawale Ogunlana. Thanks a lot for being here today.
Thank you, Buka, for having me.
Why are we talking about cholera in 2024? What happened?
Well, now cholera in itself is a bacterial infection, and it resides mostly in water. That's one of the reservoirs is water, and also humans. And because we live in an environment where there is poor sanitation, people do not know how, where they get their water from. Some people get their water from their canal, and then also they don't have good toilets. They dispose feces also in that same water, and they drink the same water. So because of that, there is always, that interbreeding. Some people don't have sewage disposal, like sewage septic tanks. So no septic tank, and then water overflows. This is the rainy season, so all of these things begin to overflow. So that's why you see that yes, it's graphic. I'm sorry to paint a very graphic picture, but this is actually what happens, that we now see these outbreaks. And so far in Lagos, at least, we've heard that there are about 17, deaths, confirmed deaths, as of 14 hours ago. So that is what cholera is. This is actually a bacterial infection that, one of the major things, the major reason why people die from it is diarrhea. So it's an acute diarrheal infection. So that's the reason. That is why we are still hearing about it, because of the fact that poor sanitation is one of the greatest challenges that we are facing right here in Nigeria. And, the poor contamination of food, contamination of water sources, these are the issues.
Because that was the next question I was going to ask. Because when I heard cholera, I started thinking, is it the water? Is it the sachet water people are drinking? So you're saying it can also be food as well?
Yes, it can also be
So how
food.
is this happening now? People are eating the wrong things or eating in the wrong places.
Okay.
What exactly is it? Is it you can use... You should be worried about what you are eating or where you are eating, or both?
Both, actually. So you, where you are eating, what you are eating, like raw foods, foods that are not well processed. For instance, let's use an instance of crab, right? If a crab is, contains cholera and it's not cooked if it's cooked for 8 minutes, it might still be there. But if it's cooked for 10 minutes, it won't be there anymore. So sometimes, that difference can actually spell life and death. And the truth is, it has to be it has to be in a very large amount for people to actually get infected. So the thing is, there is a lot of contamination of food, poor handling of food. Food handlers, some people, they don't wash their hands after using the toilet. They come out and then they're handling food. I know what's worrying right now is that we are in a period of festivities where there's a lot of food exchange. And this is part of the things that we might see that will lead to a rising trend of cholera. Not that it's anything for us to be worried about, but we just need to be very concerned on how we handle food, the water, where we drink water from, not just, do you treat your water? All of those things like that are things that we have to put into consideration right now.
I know there's a difference between an outbreak and an epidemic and a pandemic. Those are all different stages.
Yes.
So they've called it an outbreak now. So how widespread is this in Lagos? I know we've heard about the Lekki and environments.
Yes.
The island, it seems to be where this has originated from. How far spread have you heard about it being?
Okay, yes, so it has been spread in just a few local governments of the state right now. I think recently, as of last week, in my own practice, I came across a case too as well. We have just pockets right now, so it's not anything it's not an epidemic right now. So it's just an outbreak and we just have some hotspots. But what I'm happy about is that the Lagos State has issued a protocol on what to do, how to assess cases like this and what to do at that point in time.
Yeah. So, I mean, cholera is obviously transmissible, right? When we first heard about Ebola the first time, they were like, oh, don't even when it's a corpse, don't touch. We know how serious that was. With COVID, we had to wear masks and all of that. Now, with cholera, how is it transmitted? Because you mentioned about sanitation.
Yes.
If my environment is clean, am I safe? Or if I come in contact with someone, do I get it? And is it by coughing? Is it by touching? Is it by how is it transmitted? So that maybe people are also
okay. So first thing is that human to human transmission is possible, but it's not the primary means of getting the infection. So the primary means of getting this infection is fecal oral. It's what we call fecal oral. That's true. Contaminated feces into water, and then from there people consume it, or maybe it's not. All of those things. That's how people get it. So the fecal oral routes, that's how people get the infection. It can also be through poor sanitation systems if it's present a lot in water or in food as well. So maybe the food was not well treated and it's contaminated with it. So that is the reason why we talk about sanitation being one of the major issues why. Or maybe give an instance, someone in their home doesn't have proper septic tank, and the septic, and their sewage and feces disposal mixes with their source of water. And that can also happen. That can lead to breeding. And from there, people can pick up. Somebody has the infection, disposes his stool improperly, reinfects another person, things like that. Alongside with contaminated, like I said, because we are in the rainy season right now. So there'll be a lot of, water surge, and then it will be pushing in to different water sources. And some of these sources might actually be infected with cholera. So that's why we are seeing this happening right now. But human to human contact is usually more or less very, very low. It's usually in hospital settings that we get to see such kind of things. Maybe when, patients or like patients with healthcare workers, carrying and taking care of these patients that are infected. So that's when we get to see that.
You mentioned food a lot. Are there any kinds of foods that are more susceptible to, carrying this thing? I mean, grains, I want to believe grains, maybe not, but maybe like proteins, fish, are those the kind of things that should be paid more attention to?
Yes, usually our usual proteins and, foods that we eat, soups that we make, it can be inside any of these things, but usually we can find them in those things when they are not well cooked. So, if you go to some bukas, for instance, or bukaterias, some cafeterias, where the food, you are trying to cook fast so that people can eat, right? And it's not well processed, and then the water that is used to prepare it is probably infected, then we can have things like that.
Is water a bigger problem than food, though?
I would say water is, yes. If I'm to pick between food and water transmission, I'll actually say water transmission is actually one of the
What are the symptoms? What should we look out for? When you're feeling, because when you hear cholera, diarrhea, I just think maybe about stooling a lot or maybe vomiting, I don't know. This is as a layman now. But what are the symptoms that people should take note of if they feel that they need to get attention immediately and not just self-medicate?
Okay, the first thing that, it's a diarrheal disease. So when it comes to cholera, the first thing that appears is diarrhea, painless diarrhea. So the person has the urge to go use the toilet, and each time they go to the toilet, they have painless watery stools. Usually that's how it always starts. And it's something that we like to call in medicine rice water. So like when you wash your rice, that's water. So at some point it begins to look like that, right? So the first thing to look out for is frequent episodes of diarrhea. You're going to the toilet once, twice, thrice, you realize that this is becoming an issue. So that is actually the first presentation. Then there can also be vomiting, abdominal cramps, weakness. And the weakness usually comes as a result of passing a lot of watery stool, and the person has lost a lot of fluid, water, electrolytes, and all. So they become very weak, tired. So those are the symptoms that we actually notice.
How fatal is this? Because we're hearing of deaths. So it's, of course, when people hear death, it gets scarier. Is it one of those sicknesses or diseases that can't be treated at a certain stage? At what stage is it that you know that, okay, if I get it at this stage, I can still fix it? Or are there maybe certain people who have it worse than others? How fatal is it?
Okay, so cholera can be lethal, right? That's the fact, and that is why we are seeing deaths. But the death is not because it cannot be treated. It's because Nigerians, and we like to present very late.
And we self-medicate a lot.
We self-medicate a lot. So we feel that, okay, if I pop one flagyl, this thing should stop. And it keeps happening. Yes. This thing, they keep us now. They punch in, that kind of attitude. So it is that attitude that makes them present late to the hospital, and then at that point, they are probably dehydrated. In some cases, even, kidney failure can actually set in. Seizures can actually happen, and then it becomes fatal. And it's even worse in children. So because children are smaller, so when they lose water, it becomes much more evident clinically. So that is why the most important thing that you can do is to get to the hospital on time, and the first thing they do is to perform a triage and an assessment. Okay, how much stool are you losing? Can it just be replaced by oral, rehydration salt or solution? They tell you what to do. In fact, you can actually prepare your own oral rehydration salt at home. You just get a liter of clean water, you prepare it with 6 teaspoons of sugar and half a teaspoon of salt. You mix it together, and then you drink it, and then you go to the hospital. They can tell you that, okay, the diarrhea that you're having right now is not that severe. Use ORS and you will be okay. Or they give you a pack of ORS and then you can take it with you. Or if it is severe, then you need to be kept on admission so that you are replaced. Everything that you are losing through stooling can be replaced, through intravenous fluid. So the first thing, the most important thing is assessment and presenting on time to the hospital for that assessment to be performed. Otherwise, it becomes fatal.
Yeah. I mean, I hear you, but as much as I also don't want to encourage self-medication, Nigerians are poor. Let's be honest. Now, most people see healthcare now as one of those things where if I can avoid it, I'd rather do that. We've also seen a lot of this pharmaceuticals leaving the country. So medication is pretty expensive now for a lot of people. So I like the fact that you mentioned ORS there. While we're not saying people should self-medicate, what are some things you can do before you get to the hospital? I guess that's one of them,
I think right? that's the number one thing, right? So your homemade ORS is something that you can actually prepare at home, right? So like I mentioned, you get a liter of clean water, you put 6 teaspoons of sugar and half a teaspoon of salt, mix it, and then you drink it after every episode of loose stool. For instance, for an adult, you can take 1 liter after every episode of loose stool. For children that are between 6 to 9 years old, they can consume about 200 mils or maybe 1/5 of that, right? And then for babies, it can be about 100 mils, which is like 1/10 of that. So that kind of preparation can actually be helpful and also helps to keep the hydration status of the individual prior to when they get to the hospital. So you don't, when there is going to be water loss because of cholera infection, that loss has to be replaced. So that is where oral rehydration salts come in, or ORS comes in. And you can do it at home, right? And that is what we are also trying to let people know. So the more they know this, the better it is, so that you don't tilt, tilt the patient such that they come too bad to the hospital, and then we now have to start scampering and looking for what needs to be done. Yeah. The second thing is that treatment. The last word we've heard from the Lagos State government regarding cholera treatment is that at all levels it is free. So, which is a good thing, and I think Lagosians and Nigerians should actually be quite excited about that. But the most important thing is don't wait until it is too late.
Yeah, I was going to ask, at what point should you, after the ORS, at what point should you be like, okay,
So, for instance, any progressive, loss of stool that is more than 48 hours, you have to get to the hospital. Anything above 2 days, I believe that you should have gone to the hospital, right? And you know that, okay, you've been taking ORS after every loose stool, but it's still not going. It means that something needs to be done, because the more it continues, the more you will get sick, the more you will not even be able to take that ORS. Sometimes even, you might start vomiting. So the ORS might not be that effective anymore. So you will need to be replenished. So getting to the hospital is that. So as a random advice, once you are having passage of loose stool that is over 48 hours, I believe that you should get to see the doctor. And you know that you've been making use of this ORS therapy, you can go see the doctor. Yeah.
At the end of the day, a lot of this, I guess the biggest way to avoid it is prevention, which is what doctors always preach.
Yes.
Prevention is always better than, even though it takes work away from people's hands. But first of all, I know you're not a policy person, you're not in government, but a lot of what you said at the start of this kept tilting my head to what government should be doing or should have been doing with regards to sanitation.
Yes.
Sewage, drains are blocked. Sometimes you see them clear out these drains
and leave it there,
and it washes back in.
Yes.
We've had many conversations about, building public toilets. Nigeria is the public defecation capital of the world. People just sit anywhere and pass this thing, and it flows into wherever. So on a government level, those are conversations that need to be had, right? I believe.
Yes, absolutely. I personally believe that we shouldn't be having like how we started, we shouldn't be having a conversation of cholera in 2024. Other countries across the world have conquered it by proper planning of cities. When you're building a house, you don't just build a house and without toilet. A house has to have a toilet, a septic tank as well. All of these things are things that have to be done even on a community level. And let's be honest, there are particular things that we as individuals can take note of. I mean, in 2024, if you are buying a house, you should know that they have a septic tank. These are the things. Landlords shouldn't just build houses, and without having proper, and just pass the drain out. These are some of the things that we can do as individuals on a community level. I personally believe that, yes, while the government has, oversight function and regulation, as individuals, we need to equip ourselves with some knowledge that will help us. Planning and putting this, for instance, for toilets, that every house has a toilet, right? Then also the habit of hand washing is something that we don't really like to do. And the fact is, the hand happens to be one of the dirtiest, places in our bodies, because we use it to interact with a lot of things, right? So hand washing, regular hand washing is also very important. Food handling too, how we handle food is also very important. So these are the things that we need to consider. Personally, for me, I would say that yes, we do need to talk about planning and sanitation. Keeping our gutters clear. Yes, sometimes we need the government's help in that, knowing fully well that whenever we are preparing and going into the rainy season, we need to have it in mind that cholera outbreak can be possible because of this overload. So let us plan towards it, clear all the drainages, ensure that there is proper flow through of gutters. Communities can also ensure this by ensuring that in their own homes, there is passage of water. You can do this when you're building your own house. Please also consider having a gutter so that water can flow out, into the proper drainage channels. These are the conversations that we need to start having, because if not, next year we'll probably still be here talking about cholera outbreak again, because that's how it is. So it's not just about the talk, it's about we doing, and we as a community of individuals, we need to start doing this for ourselves.
I mean, we'll talk about government. I like the fact that you touch on the individual as well, but is it advisable? I know gas is very expensive and kerosene too. Are we supposed to now overcook our meals? Are we supposed to boil water before we drink it?
No, the fact is that if we have the proper things in place, this shouldn't happen. And also, susceptibility to cholera is also a thing. For instance, like your immune status, your level of immunity. There are some people that you might actually just purge for a few days if you have cholera, right? Good. Yes, there are some people that are more prone to having cholera. For instance, people who are treating peptic ulcer, because one of the barriers that stops cholera infection from coming through is the stomach acid, right? If it meets a lot of stomach acid, probably it might not even happen, right? But people who are treating peptic ulcer take drugs that reduce the acidity. So sometimes they are at risk of having this kind of infection if they are exposed to contaminated food and water. So if we can reduce the contamination, right? If we can, that's the primary thing. If we can reduce the risk of contamination of this, with this bacteria, then we are doing a great job. Yeah. We are already doing a great job. So that's personally for me, that's how I think we should look at it.
I did see one of our cameramen just went to sanitize his hands.
Okay.
While we're doing that. Well, yeah. I did see a question on social media about vaccines. Yes. Is this something that can be vaccinated against?
Yes.
Or something that we should be thinking about?
Yes. Vaccination for cholera is possible. Yes, for anyone between 18 to 64, you can get vaccinated. You get your first shot, and then a week after, you get the next shot. Yes, it's possible. And I think it provides about 80 to 90%, immunity, like a covering for cholera. But then, the vaccine is good.
Yeah.
But if we take the vaccine from now till tomorrow, and we are not, we will still have these reservoirs in place. So yes, the vaccine is good. I advise everyone who can to get to a hospital, inquire about it. If it's possible, get yourself a cholera shot. It might also be helpful during this time too.
Thank you very much. You've been very, very helpful, very insightful there. I guess hopefully it doesn't mean people should be in panic.
No.
Don't be scared. Just do what you need to do.
Yes, you just need to do what needs to be done.
Thanks a lot for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for joining us. Like I always say, you can follow the conversation on social media. Please use the hashtag #RubbinMinds. When you send us a message, I'll see you next Sunday.
Teasing me, now it's time to show